Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this special edition of CMI webinar In Conversation. I'm Anne Franca. I'm the Chief Executive of the CMI, and today I'm absolutely delighted to be in conversation with Manisha Mistry, CMI's Chartered Manager of the Year 2020. Manisha is the head of digital culture at Rolls-Royce and beat out over 90 entries to win this coveted title. So congratulations once again and welcome to Manisha. Nice to see you again.
And you, Anne, thank you.
So first, maybe you can start for our audience. What led you to even think about doing a CMI qualification and indeed becoming chartered?
So it was really interesting because until probably the more recent phases of my career, I hadn't really appreciated what an institute provided and what I would choose and pick. And it was only because of a number of courses, of development courses that I went on, that CMI was referred to quite a few times and endorsed, actually, that I started to understand more of what is an institute, full stop, and then how can they help me. And what was really, really important in that was I wanted to understand how it enhanced what I did, but also worked in the flow of how I felt would be valuable. It's not just theory, it needed to be practice. And my journey on those programs that CMI had endorsed was really, really positive, and it made me delve deeper. And I understood the journey and the links that it made to making me better at who I am, but find out who I am as well. And that's really my journey with CMI. I won't lie, I might have gone with another institute that I think is in a similar field to yourself, and I just didn't feel that they worked for me. And I think that was an important part of decision making for why an institute, what it offers, but picking the right one.
It's interesting you made that point about self-discovery, and we know that one of the huge benefits of chartership is because it's a very reflective process, people have to really become much more self-aware. And in becoming self-aware, they become more self-confident. Was that something that you experienced on your journey to chartership?
Definitely. I think the personal reflection and then acting in the flow of that reflection is really, really crucial. And chartership encourages that, but it uses it as a basis to understand you and evaluate how you're moving through. And I think that's a really firm basis by which you get a sense of your progress, but also the steps you can take and own in doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's quite important, isn't it? And how important was you mentioned actioning it. So one of the big elements of the chartered status is you have to give examples of your impact in the workplace and what you actually did. Was that useful to you? And what did you learn from that?
It's incredibly useful because within a corporate setting, a lot of action is derived by tangible outcomes, so value saved or things done. And I actually think by having to do the process that chartership takes you on, it's about reflective, as in your development, as in how have you grown and harnessed the skills you've got and applied them. So it's the softer, it's the intangible. And sometimes they get forgotten. And I think having a process such as chartership, and being able to go through that at your pace, but with the support of others, or making use of the other attributes that come from the institute in terms of learning material, the community and the network, means that you can pick out those points and become more aware of them in what you do, instead of just focusing on the outcome of what you've done.
Sure, it's how you've managed and led that outcome, I suppose, that's important, and your individual contribution and how you've led others. And speaking of that, what is your organization's view of the chartered status? What have your peers said about it? Have you had any, what's been the reaction?
Well, I think having had received the award was a really big thing, because as an organization, and being so large and global, you don't really know how many of you are within the same institute necessarily. And so it was great to see us all kind of come out the woodwork and go, hey, I'm with CMI, or tell me a little bit about how hard it was to be chartered. And I think everyone assumes it's a big process, it's a big file or some submittance of application, and it isn't. It's really about showcasing who you've become, how you are bettering yourself and what you do. And I had about 3 or 4 immediate conversations with some of my peers, and that was fantastic. And then that then also extended into the company and how they see chartership, and they want to understand more. I think it's something that isn't as recognized as it needs to be. And yet, whether you're a manager or not, I think the skills that you gain from such a chartership, you use them everywhere, whether you're an individual or a manager or a leader, it doesn't matter. They all come into play. And they have recognized that. And I think that's a real telling change in how we see leadership and management going forward.
Well, that's great. And of course, we do undertake an independent economic impact assessment of chartership. And we do know that not only does it benefit the individual in terms of a pay rise, but it also benefits their organizations and the wider economy. And I think that the figure is adding 22,000 pounds of GVA to the wider economy, and even more in the private sector. So it's great that they're appreciating that. Can you share with us, though, tell us about your winning entry, and what it was that you did that so captured the imagination of our judges and gave you the Chartered Manager of the Year award?
Well, if I might, I'll first be honest and say that when I wrote my submission, it was not to submit. And I think it's an important point that I have to make, because I wasn't sure it would be a winning submission. I hadn't actually clarified what it was I was going to submit either. And in going through the steps of, well, I'll use it to help me do something else, which was to have a conversation with my land manager around what I had achieved and where I was going. Very quickly, it helped me to understand that what I had achieved was quite phenomenal with the support of others, and that actually, why wouldn't I submit it? It's a really important process that I hadn't recognized until I went through it for a completely different reason, but I think it's one that I'm really glad I did. And actually what I submitted in terms of the detail was around a large scale kind of change management transformation program on culture. It was something that I had tied back to my master's, which was CMI endorsed and gave me a level 7 qualification through CMI as well. And I'd done several of these previously from a level 3 to 5 to 7. So I'd done my journeying through CMI in a course kind of syllabus academic way, but not in terms of all the other resources that I supplemented it with. But I wanted to prove what I'd written. And so back to that point around putting it into practice, that's my submission. It was what I'd wrote in my master's and observed, and saying, well, actually, now let's take that hypothesis and apply it. And how do we change the culture of an organization to embrace digital, the technology of data? And that's what my submission was about.
Which is absolutely great. So it's the translating of what you learned and then applying it immediately to practice. And how did you lead and manage that? And what results did you get? And just, changing culture is a tough gig for anybody. What were the key KPIs? I know you set yourself some. Share some of those key KPIs that you set for yourself and whether or not you got them.
Yeah, no, of course. So part of this was very much focused on an organizational change, and we were 54,000 at that time. So it was, how could we enable a population of 54,000, at least 50% of that, to engage with digital and come away with a greater awareness? How could we then convert that into practical application so we can see them not just embracing it, but now applying it? And then how can we drive some revenue and some value, some kind of tangible value off the back of that? All very bold, very ambitious, but required more than just a learning skill set. This was about our environment, the networks, the partners we work with, and very much getting under the skin of who we are as a company and where we want to be. And so we broke that down, and we made use of networks and collaboration and bringing in all of our pioneers, as we call them. So those that are already natively of that way, and allowing them the platform, giving them the elevation, empowering them. So again, back to that cultural piece, and bringing in those interventions. And I'm pleased to say we did hit the 50%, if not more. And we're now actually, thank you, we're now actually moving that forward at even greater levels, I think, is what we've been doing in 2020. So it persists is the point, I think.
Well, and of course, COVID has been called the great accelerator of all things digital, and I'm sure that your 50% has increased significantly since then. But a huge congratulations on moving that needle to 50% pre-COVID, because so many organizations have said that so many people were reluctant to embrace digital, and that is one of the good things that you see coming out of COVID. Are there other what do you see the changes and challenges of COVID? Some of the perhaps challenges and some of the, if you see any silver linings.
So the challenges are quite eminent in the fact that as organisations, we've all typically worked physically together, and without having had that broken so quickly and lost so quickly, it meant we weren't able to adjust and appreciate how virtual has its benefits, but actually you still lose a lot of the value in face-to-face. And what I mean by that is mental health and well-being. I'm not talking about just the physicalities of engagement. It's the stuff you no longer see, the things that you no longer can sense and feel. And as managers, that's really hard, because you've now got to get even more intimate with your team without being intimate, without being in a physical setting that allows you to register body language or other things that are happening around you. And I think that's been lost, because in the technology we can capture it, but we can't in the processes, in the ways we work, in the operations, in the changes of that EQ, I guess I call it and treat it as. And that's been hard, that sudden jump, because everyone's focused on the need to get the technology working. The human side has been probably less apparent or played to, and now we're seeing some of that come through. I think the benefits, though, is for those that have been able to adapt or almost say, we're going to rewrite this and rewrite it with you, has been fantastic. I feel there is a much better, flatter stage for us all to work together on. And it removes some of the bureaucratic stuff that I think as managers and leaders, we have to deal with day in, day out. I know for Rolls-Royce, for many of us, virtual is now the way. Unless there's a need to, or we know it adds value, there's not a pressure to go work in a physical environment. And a lot of our processes in the way we then manage is also being adapted and adjusted to cater for that, which is fantastic, because you open yourself to much more diversity in who you have, how it works, and what you then gain as a result of it.
Well, that's a great point, and we're going to come back to that point in some of the questions. And by the way, if you want to ask Manisha a question, please do just put it in the chat. And we've also got some pre-submitted questions here. But going back to what you said on well-being, we completely agree. We just did a major survey, Management Transformed, and the number one issue that it brought out in management and leadership was about well-being. So what are some of the things that you do to look after yourself and your team in this marathon crisis?
Oh, well, one of the biggest things is that we have to be more transparent and recognize that if you're not having a good day, that doesn't mean you pretend to have a good day, right? There's got to be a bit of humanization in this. And we very quickly brought our teams together virtually on any form of media that would work for them, to say there's these multitudes of ways of connecting with us. Breaking up your day, I don't know about anyone else, but their home hygiene typically runs out. You start whenever, you finish whenever, you lose the track of actually a normal daytime. So bringing in those disciplines and making sure that you practice what you want others to do, because it's very easy to fall into bad habits. And then we do lots of well-being bits where it's either a social get-together or something that breaks up your day, a share, a go for a walk, a virtual walk together, things where it just changes the dimensions of your day and it gets the outside in, because that's what you lose when you go virtual. I think it's then having an open door. Again, a very hard thing to do when your door is now virtual, but how do you say, I've got a problem and here it is, and seek others' help as well as allow others to seek your help? Because I think that's that EQ piece I mentioned, of making sure that you see it as a human business changing, not just a corporate setting needing to be different.
Yeah, there's some really great tips in there. And you also said, and I think this is an important point to pick up on, that you felt that some of your the more bureaucratic processes in management had fallen by the wayside and been streamlined. Do you feel that it's that COVID and the challenges of making so many decisions more quickly and virtually has resulted in greater agility?
Yeah, definitely. And it's the hard bit now is making sure it sticks, because it can, as things start to open up, as maybe there's that faint sight of going back to the way it was. It's like, brilliant, we can push all these things back in play now. It's actually to say, is it better? And make sure that you're genuinely having those conversations. And if it is, keep them off. Don't turn them back on.
You've said a really important point. Somebody else, an NHS CEO, put it as, let's not restore factory settings. And what's your view? Are you going to lobby and to help Rolls-Royce keep some of the practices that have moved the needle forward in COVID, so that you don't just go back to the way it was?
Absolutely. I don't think we have a choice anyway. I'm sure for the bigger organisation, as I've seen in the news, there's changes we've had to make anyway. And this has allowed us to accelerate, actually. And it would just be detrimental to take certain steps back. But that said, again, I think there's an assessment that does need to be made as you go through that, just to say, what have we lost, if anything, as a result of moving this way? Because there may be some validation that says these bits still need to be there, albeit not always on.
Sure. And I'm sure you'll go back into the office at some point and for some time. I mean, what people are telling us is they want a hybrid method of working. So they want days at home, days in the office, or maybe even a day where they're combined if they don't have too long a commute. What's your view of that? Do you think you'll keep with the hybrid working?
Yes, certainly. I mean, at this moment in time, for anyone that's office-based, the instruction is you work from home. If it's working for you, work from home, make it work, make it fit. And as managers, cater, accommodate, look at alternatives. It shouldn't be that as soon as our offices are fully open, that's where we all go back. As the data innovation part of what is Rolls-Royce, we have always been virtual. So for us, this is as it was. It's just we don't have the physical location to go to.
Yeah, I understand that. Now, before I turn to the questions, I've got to ask this. For those of you listening that may want yourselves to become chartered and perhaps then submit your entry for the Chartered Manager of the Year award, I have to ask, what tips would last year's winner give to all of you future winners out there for their entries?
So I was trying to think about this, and I've got 4. Ooh. So the first one is that it's never too early to start writing. Put it in something that you can keep going back to and typing and tinkering, because your thoughts, they develop over time. There's things you can add and so on. But I found that by doing it over a couple of weeks, at least a month, it just developed the thinking and allowed me to recognize what I had personally achieved, which is, remember, that's what the Chartered Award's about, isn't it? Seek the views of others is my second one, and that includes your family. There is some great perspectives. I think we talk about Jahara's window. I know it's an old one, but you don't know what you don't know because you haven't seen it in yourself, but others will have. And I think there's something about that makes it richer and gives you at least an acknowledgement of your own growth if you haven't already gained that or banked it, as it were. Number 3 then is, when you're writing this, think of it as a piece of history, something that you can refer to in others and be proud of, because I think that way of storytelling, it will come through in the words you use, the way you tell that story. But then look back at it. I always look back at it and go, look at what I did. Oh my God, look at what we did. And it spurs you for the next one. So this is only a capture of a moment in time. So make it inspirational, because you use it. Don't rely on others using it. And then the last one is a very practical one. Word count. So I know it sounds daft, but try and be so many under it, because it will make you concise. It will get to the succinctness of what you're saying, and check it against what's being asked. And I know it sounds really daft. It's the classic exam thing, but are you answering what's being asked, and are you doing it succinctly? Because if you can do those 2 things, you've nailed it. You're good. You've got something really, really, really exciting there.
Well, that is amazing advice, and I hope everybody noted that down. And I hope that many of you will, like Manisha, undergo the charter journey and apply for the award. Now, we have loads of questions. Our first one is from Lindsay Connolly, and she says, what would you say is the main benefit of being chartered?
So it's validation, and it sounds strange, but for me personally, it was validation. It was helping me to see I'm growing, I'm learning, but I'm getting the inputs from such a rich, diverse community. What the CMI and the Institute gives us is access to a huge wealth of information, knowledge, and people. And so chartership allows me full access to that, and I can put it on and apply it just in time as I need it, as I want it, as well as ahead of time. And I think chartership then is me showing that in action. It's really being able to say, so if you have an interview, if you're going for a job increase, if you want to change role, or if you want to take on a new project, you can articulate that development you're making and the application of those skills in a way that your employer gets and really wants. And I think that ability to mature in that sense is what chartership gave me.
Amazing. That's a great answer. Thank you. Our next question, and you did touch on this earlier, it comes from Andy Bibb. Even with CMI qualifications, it can be difficult to receive recognition or promotions. I believe this is due to unconscious bias and more males being promoted into management roles. Have you come across this before? And what advice do you have to approach this when you're with your employer when you're not being valued?
It's a really challenging situation now, isn't it? Because we can see this present and being quite openly discussed. And I think it's about making sure that you can point to the examples. You can confidently go, well, this is actually the evidence of what I'm doing, not just it feels like. And I think for me, part of the chartership and actually going on this journey with CMI allows me that confidence to be able to say, well, hang on a minute, here I can compare myself to peers, and here are my demonstrable values. Why are they not the same or equivalent? And therefore, why am I not suitable? And change, almost remove the bias conversation out of it, because I do think that you can touch on either sides, and it's good to be able to qualify what you're going in with rather than just talk from I see a lot of one type of person out there and there's no one like me. Why is that? And it just helps to qualify, I think. Then after that, obviously there's a further conversation. Yes, of course I've met it, but this is about me showing my qualities. And I think that's where the skills and the chartership and other aspects help me to validate those qualities.
Absolutely. And there's a question from Patrick, but first there's a question from Cliff that builds on what you were just saying. So has being Chartered Manager of the Year helped your career within Rolls-Royce? And has it opened any doors for you? What reactions did you receive? And did you get any recognition or for that?
It's been absolutely huge. So yes, I'm pleased to say it was recognised. We had quite a large splash across the corporate pages, and I had lots of responses internally of, it's about time, you're well deserved, and the things that you kind of hope are there but you don't really know. And that came at all levels. I think it's important to say that wasn't just at a senior level. That was actually within my peer groups, within our early careers, all sorts of areas. I have progressed, although my title stays the same, my remit is much bigger, and there's some new Horizon news that will be coming through next year, which is great. That basically what it's allowed me to do is not have to explain why I'm good enough. It's here's the pitch to go play on. Can I help you play? And I think that's the game changer for me.
Yeah, and that plays perfectly into Patrick's question, which is, okay, how can we help more managers become aware of the benefits of joining CMI and becoming a chartered manager? I know that I want Manisha to answer that. I know that we are starting to activate and invest in greater social media exposure and encouraging members and chartered managers to share their messages with others. So do watch out for those developments, especially in the new year with our new online communities. But Manisha, how would you answer Patrick's question?
No, I think you've hit it right on the head. You've got to hear the voice of those that have gone through the journey and experienced it and are now moving and paving different pathways for themselves, because there's nothing better than hearing it straight and direct from those that are doing it, not just those that have it available to give you. And I think that needs to be at organisational level. So something that I'm working in with our HR team is, how do I help them understand the power of an institute and what it provides as an organisation? Because I go through it myself and I see these benefits as an individual of that, rather than it being maybe the institute that comes in and talks to the company. So, you know, there's a need to hear different voices, I think, in this, and to make sure that those that are going on this journey can feel that it's value at all stages of it, not just at the point of getting the chartered manager status, but even before that.
Sure. And a question from Gavin, building on that. So have you used your chartered manager status? It sounds like you have, to drive improvements in your organization. So just that example you gave of engaging with HR to help them understand. And, you know, are there what examples do you have of how you use that to help your organization to improve?
I think it's helping them see some of the tools or the models, because you can have a friend who can join in as CMI, who can get sight and visibility of some of the kind of assets, some of the blogs, the stories, the journeys that are there, and the frameworks. I think Manager Transform's been brilliant in what it's there to help people understand in the shifts that need to be made. But a lot of it is practical. I'm going to be honest. I do it in the what I deliver, not necessarily in pointing them to where it sits, because when they then go, how have you done that? Where did your thinking come from? It came from there. So you can then connect the two. And I that's just how I work. I think it's down to each person to see where their company is in this journey, or the teams that they support, and how best to articulate the value you see with them, because it will be different, I think.
Yeah. And, you know, we do aim, one of our values is practical, and we aim for the advice to be practical. And it's great that you mentioned our report management Transformed. It's available for free on our website, so do download it. It talks about how to manage and lead in this marathon crisis, and what are the practical tips you can do, and what's important now. So it's great that you referenced that. So a question from Carl, he wants to know, what's next on your development journey?
Oh dear, part of me needs a break, right? And I think, you know, I say that, yeah, I say that in jest, but I do think there's something about recognizing when you're learning in the spirit of growing, and therefore just need to culminate all of that to then take that next step. And I think right now I'm in that in a small way, but I think one bit that's really, really becoming more and more evident is the need for our leaders and managers to understand the technical shifts that are taking place right now, because I think it's going to need to be a part of your armory, whether you like it or not. And how can you build that literacy of understanding what's going on without needing to know all the detail? It's quite a crucial part of taking the next step in terms of leading and managing, whether it be yourself or others. And I think that for me is something that I'm currently looking at. What's the balance? What does that actually consist of? And how do I ensure that I can have that to myself, as well as enable others to go get that and do that? And I guess that's where I'm at. I'm practicing what I've learned. I'm very much in that mode. But my next step is, how do you start to bring in the other elements of leadership, particularly entrepreneurship, which is one that's really coming through for us, and that I'm piloting at the moment. But how do you take on those newer parts that cater for situations like this, you know, the prolongedness of a crisis or something else being chucked your way, and you're just going to have to adjust and adapt, knowing that others are waiting for you or seeking your view to help them, rather than just helping yourself.
Yeah, no, that's a very important point. Okay, so I think this might be our last question, and it's from Dylan, who says, congratulations on the award, Manisha. You mentioned the assessment process. What was the most important thing you learned from it?
It's a good one. Really good question. I think it's to be honest to yourself of what you're doing. And I suffered a lot throughout the 2 years of what I was doing and what I've been doing even now, of imposter syndrome. And actually accepting that that's just your brain telling you you're doing crazy things that I'm not ready for yet. It's not to say you can't do it. It's not to say what you're doing isn't right. It's just, I can't, you know, I'm struggling, and therefore I'm protecting you because I don't know how to tell you you're doing great. And actually use that. really use that and power it through what you get on with. Because I think in writing my submission, I downplayed what I did initially. And then when you get past that and you understand how much you had to evolve to get what you did done, you suddenly start to present and write a different story. And that means that you act differently. And I think it's about taking that through. And I feel like I have definitely done that in 2020. So that's the most valuable thing I learned through that process and that assessment phase of getting a submission to you.
Well, that's an excellent answer. It was a great question, and that speaks to that self-confidence that this helped you develop, and as well as the self-awareness. So thank you so much for this chat, Manisha. You've been really inspiring and wonderfully down to earth as well. And I know that everybody's really enjoyed hearing about your journey. And if you want to find out more about the CMI journey, please do sign up and in the chat and find out more. And thank you so much. Manisha, have a wonderful Christmas with lots of walks with your family. And thank you all for joining us. And take care.
Thank you.